Hello everyone, this is Akash here. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to build an image using Dockerfile. Okay, so let's go with the agenda. So first of all, we'll be discussing about what is Dockerfile, and then we'll be talking about the Dockerfile directives. That how do you write Dockerfiles? What are the directives which we are using inside a Dockerfile? And then yeah, we are going to write a Dockerfile. And once the Docker file is written, we will see how we can build an image out of the Docker file. Okay, so let's go with the definition of Docker file. Okay, so what is Docker file? So Docker can build image automatically by reading the instructions from the Docker file. As mentioned that Docker files, we have some instructions which has been written that execute some commands inside a terminal, and you'll end up getting an image out of it. So that's the use of a Docker file. So, in the second step is that a Docker file is a text document that contains all the command a user could call on the command line to assemble an image. Okay, so as mentioned that in my previous video, I have shown that once you download a base image and once you go inside a container, you can write your own instructions as a in the command prompt. Like for example, if you need to install Git or curl, you can just simply install the package using in Ubuntu. We do it via apt-get install Git or apt-get install curl, and then you can commit a image out of the container. Here in this case, we are not doing it in that way. We are writing all the instructions inside a Docker file, like all the commands which we are going to use, we'll be writing that instruction in a Docker file. And once you compile that Docker file, there is an image which will be created. Okay. So next we have the Dockerfile directives. Okay, so what are the things which we are going to write inside a Dockerfile? So the first thing always starts with from. Okay, so from is nothing but it starts a new build stage and it sets a base image. Okay, so this is basically the first directive inside the Docker file. So where, for example, if you need a base image of Ubuntu, so that's the command which you use, that's the directive which we use from Ubuntu and the particular version of it. Then it will create a layer of Ubuntu inside your container. Next we have the env directive. So using env you can set any environment variables. So this can be referenced inside a Docker file and it is visible in the container at the runtime. Okay. So I'll show you what is the use of environment. We can use environment in several ways. So one way of using environment is that you can, for example, many times inside a corporate network, you have to set some proxies. So using environment, you can just set all the proxies which you require to run your application. And there are several other ways also we can use environment. So I'll just show that example to you. Okay. Next we have copy. So copy basically add files from your local machine to the Docker container. Okay. So that's a very simple method that, for example, sometimes when you are writing a Docker file, you do a copy from your GitHub location to the Docker container. Okay. So not basically GitHub location because for that, for example, for to download anything from the URL, we use add. So if you go to the last command, that is add directive. So add works similar to copy, but it also has some additional features which copy doesn't have. Okay, so with add actually you can pull a file using a URL. For example, if you have some files in GitHub, you can normally in command line in the terminal we do wget and then then the URL to download a file from the URL. Here in this case you can just do add and then the URL, and then you have to provide the destination folder. So all the URL files which are going to get downloaded will be copied to the destination folder. Okay, that's a use of add command. And also you can extract an archive. It's not achieve, it's archive. Sorry. So you can extract an archive into the loose file in the image. So for example, if you have an archive like abc.tar, so it will download that archive, the loose files of that archive, and it will copy to the destination folder. Okay, so that's the use of copy and add. That's how you use it. And then next you have run directive. So run basically creates a new layer on top of your previous layer by running a command inside the new layer. Okay, for example, if you have a Ubuntu image and then you run a command called as apt-get update or apt-get install git, so it will create a new layer on top of that, right? So any command which you write within the container, it will create a new layer. So that's the use of run command. So it basically runs a command for you. Okay, and next you have CMD. So I will take a separate video to explain the difference between run, CMD, and there's a separate directive called entry point. So I'll explain that later. For now, just understand that CMD is a specifies that what command you want to run within the container. Okay, so CMD basically tells you that what is the default command to run within the container at the execution time. So when you run the container, what was the default command to be executed? Okay, so that's the use of CMD. And next, you have workdir. So workdir sets the current directory inside the container. Okay, so basically, for example, you want to run some set of shell script. Okay, so shell scripts are available in a particular location. So either you can just simply run with that location, or you can provide that particular location in the workdir, so that you can use those commands directly to that particular script. Okay, so workdir, in simple words, it sets the current working directory inside the container. So you can set absolute path as well as the relative path of your destination folder. Yeah. So that's the use of directive. There are several other directives in the Docker file. So for now, just understand these are the directives which we use in most of the Docker files. Okay. So any additional directives which I'll be using in my upcoming video, I'll be explaining that to you. Okay. So and then once the Docker file is created with those directives, we have to use Docker build to build an image out of the Docker file. So the Docker build command builds an image from a Docker file. Okay. So now let's go to the terminal. Okay. So once you are inside a container, just run Docker version to see whether Docker is installed or not. So Docker is installed here, both client as well as engine. Docker engine is installed. If you don't know how to install Docker, please watch my previous video where I've explained how to install Docker from scratch. Okay. So now let's just run. I'll just create a project first. Okay, first go to your home directory. Okay, create a directory called as custom application. Okay, cd custom application, and then first create index.html. Sorry. Okay, just write hello from Akash. Okay, so I'll explain you why I'm using this index.html over here, and then I'll be creating the Docker file. Okay, so this is my Docker file. Let's write all the directives over here on and how do we use that. So first of all, using hash, you can actually provide any comment to this particular Docker file. So this is going to be a simple nginx image. Okay, so from is the first command as I have mentioned, and then I'm going to use Ubuntu image, and the version is going to be Bionic. Okay, so once you have your base image, I'm going to use env to set the environment. So as part of my environment, I'm going to use nginx version, because this particular Ubuntu image and nginx version incompatibility issues are always there. So for that, I'm going to use a particular version of nginx, which you can copy from the Docker Hub that which particular Nginx version you want. So if you want to just replicate the demo which I am doing, maybe you can use this version, that 1.14.0 Ubuntu 1.7, because I have tried with other versions also. I'm getting some incompatibility issues. So maybe you can just use this version. So this is my environment of Nginx version, and then I'll be using a run command, run directive, to do apt-get update, and then run apt-get install -y curl. Okay, so it is not recommended to use apt-get update and apt-get install separately, because unnecessary your Docker file is going to create two different layers. So instead of that, I can just add that as part of one command, because in Linux we can use double and to run both the commands at once. And also I'm going to use apt-get update and an apt-get install nginx colon dollar nginx version. Okay, so I am going to install a particular version of nginx. If you don't want to provide any version, you can just simply say apt-get install nginx, and it is going to install the latest version of nginx. But I have some incompatibility issue. That's the reason I'm using this particular version. So this is one way of using environment. So there are several other ways of using environment which I'll be explaining in my upcoming videos. Okay, so that's the just I'm just trying to give a brief example of how do you use environment, run directives, everything. Okay, so you must be wondering why I'm using apt-get update again in both the run command. So for example, in this particular command, this is going to create a layer for the installation of curl. Okay, and in the next command I'm going to install nginx, and this is also going to create a layer inside my docker container. Okay, so for instance, if my layer is already available in the local, next time when I try to run that particular image, it is not going to run this command. Okay, it is only going to run this command. So for example, if apt-get update is already updated and copied to my local, and next time when I'm trying to add only nginx, it is not going to run the update again. Okay, it will only run this particular command. So for example, if your apt-get update has not been refreshed inside the container, there might be chances that you might have some issue in refreshing the latest version of nginx or anything. Okay, so always make sure that if you have any dependency with apt-get update or any other commands, so you will have to use that command again and again with every new layer which you are going to create. Okay, so I'll explain this in the demo. So once the image will be built, I'll show you that why I said this, why I explained this. Okay, so once this run is done, then I'm going to use a cmd. So as I explained, that cmd is the command, cmd is the directive which we use to define any default command to be executed at that execution of the container. So nginx, so this is the command to execute your nginx in the daemon mode. Okay, so now that my docker file is created, I'll just come out of it, and I'll use docker build command, docker build -t, and then custom application. Okay, so this is the command to build your application. Okay, so using docker build, you can, as mentioned in the last slide, that using docker build command, you can build an image from a docker file. So okay, so now you can see that my application, my Docker file has been successfully built. And if you go to Docker images, you can see that two of the images are saved here. One is custom application which we just now built, and the Ubuntu base image. So forget about Ubuntu base image, it is an old image, but this is the newly created image which we just now built. Okay, so now what we will do, I will just try to run this particular container, run this particular image. So Docker run hyphen name. So I'm going to give a name to my um, container. So I'll just use custom application, the same name as a Docker image. Okay, hyphen D, because I'm going to run this in the daemon mode so that my container will give me the terminal to execute some other commands as well. And then I'm going to use a port because I'm going to use it in 8080 port. So that's how you can enable a port to your particular container, so that when you hit this particular container in the internet by the IP as well as the port, you will be able to access the URL. Okay, and then the image name. So okay, so both so just to avoid confusion, I'm going to give container. Okay, so the name of my container is container custom application and the image name is custom application. So this is, I'm just changing this name to avoid confusion. Okay, so now my container is created. So if you just want to check whether my application is running or not, just do curl localhost 8080 because I have enabled the port 8080, and yes, you can see that my index.html, which is a default index.html from the Nginx side, is running perfectly fine. Okay, so now I'll just show that I have created a change that is index.html, and this is my index.html. Instead of printing welcome to Nginx and all this information which I don't need for now, I just want to print hello from Akash when I hit the localhost 8080. Okay, so this is the URL which I want to get, hello from Akash. After fetching the URL, I just want to get this information. So for that, first we have to go to the container and see how Nginx has been installed. Do docker ps. So this is my container ID. So I'll just do docker exec. So exec is the command to go inside the container to execute a container. Hyphen it is for the interactive terminal. So I need a terminal and I need a bin bash terminal. Okay, so now I'm inside the container. So just do cd var, okay, and then go to www because this is my nginx folder. Okay, and do html. Okay, so this is the path where this is the path where my nginx index.html is placed. So just see the path of this. So where www the slash html is the path where we can place my index.html. Okay, so now you can exit the container and you can open. So just copy this particular path and open your Docker file. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce one new directive, that is work dir, and I'm going to use this path. Okay, and then I am going to use add or copy. So in this case both add and copy works because we just need a copy of file from the local to the Docker container. Okay, so just copy index dot sorry index.html because it is placed in the same location of Docker file, and I'm going to use dot slash because this is the relative path for the work dir. Okay, So please understand that either you can use the workdir as many times within the Docker file. Okay, it is not like that you can use workdir only once. You can use it as many times as you can. Instead of using like that, you can also use it like workdir and then www, then workdir html. So you can see that this is the first path, and then the relative path, that after where we have www, and then the second relative part is html. So for instance, you can use the absolute path also as many times, and you can use the relative path also as many times. But this is unnecessary. You are going to create multiple layers in the image. So I'm just going to go do, I'm just going to create one layer, and this provides all the information of that particular directory. Okay. So once this is copied, okay, I'll just do, I'll just save this and I'll build it again. So Docker build -t. So instead of building as the last time I built it as custom application, this time I'm going to build it as custom nginx app. Okay, with the Docker file, the present Docker file is in this location. So I'll just give dot. So this is going to create a new image now. Okay. So yeah, I was explaining about the apt-get install, why I have used apt-get update twice. So for instance, if you see here that just now we have modified some change in the Docker in Docker file. Okay, so it only executed this command. Okay, because this is the newly added step in the Docker file. All the previous steps which was already there is there in my local cache. So it did not executed run apt-get update again. So just in case, if you see here that if I would have just given apt-get install -y nginx after creating the Docker file, it would have left the apt-get update, because apt-get was already executed and it was there in the local cache. So that's the reason whenever you are trying to install any new package inside the Ubuntu image or any other any Linux environment, always attach with the update command, update package command. Okay. So now that my image has been built, I'll just do docker run hyphen d hyphen p. Hyphen d is for the daemon mode, hyphen p is for enabling the port. So the nginx is exposed in the port 80, and I'm going to enable 8080 with the port 80, and then I'm going to run the image. Okay, so I have given the image name as custom nginx image and nginx app. Okay. Okay, so it says that bind for this one is already there. So I'm just going to delete that container docker ps. Okay, so just delete this but previously created container, because port 8080 is already enabled. Or if you don't want to delete it, just run it with 8081. Okay, so instead of using 8080, I'm going to give port 8081 to this particular nginx image, nginx container. So now my container is created. You can see here docker ps. You can see both my container is running. So the previous container, that is custom application, is running on port 8080, and the new container is running on port 8081. Okay, so just now run curl localhost 8081. So this gives my this is a newly added file as part of index.html, which I have just replaced inside a Docker file. So that's how you can play around with Docker file and you can build an image out of it. So that's all for this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.